We're coming to the end of another trading week, so it's time for the weekly wrap-up. Joining me on the line to discuss some of the key economic events that have passed this week is Tony Yates from the University of Bristol. So, Tony, on Tuesday we saw Janet Yellen testify for the first time as Fed chair. A lot of emphasis of her speech was on continuity. What do you think this says about her stance on tapering, and what else do you feel was key?
Well, it was a really important speech, and I think you were right to point to the fact that she was emphasising continuity, because that's a big worry when you have a change in regime. Personally, I was surprised that they went for such an early taper, given that at that point there was no sign of their important core PCE inflation indicator turning up, although we've since had that slight tick up in December. So I was a little bit taken aback, and I guess most of the economists were. But I would expect that to be key in her mind and the mind of some fellow committee members. And I'd also expect her, like Bernanke, to be hypersensitive to a repeat of what everyone dubbed the taper tantrum. So the emphasis being on measured, pre-announced, no drastic changes in policy, and I guess that was the major point of the speech, to reassure people that she was going to follow through on what Bernanke and committee members back then were kind of pre-announcing in their own way.
Now, on Wednesday, Bank of England Governor Carney spoke. He addressed the issue of the unemployment threshold, stating that they will look at a broader range of economic indicators when deciding whether to increase rates. What can we take from this with regards to interest rates? Additionally, inflation is at that 2% target. How important is this for the UK economy?
Well, I thought the big message was that they weren't ready to put up rates anytime soon. Certainly not in 2014. Spencer Dale hinted that 2015 was more of a solid bet. So going back to the old forward guidance Mark 1, when they had the unemployment rate threshold, the idea was that they wouldn't think about it until unemployment rate hit 7%, but they would think about it at that point. And so they're now saying, well, we've had to think about it, but we're really not ready to do it at all. And I guess that means that they view the substantial fall in unemployment since August as not increasing inflationary pressure much at all, and therefore as being, in some sense, fall in the natural rate of unemployment. This is relatively dovish, I think, given that back in August, MPC as a whole didn't really want much more monetary stimulus, despite what Mark Carney was saying in that press conference back in August, which was, this is really going to kickstart the recovery. I personally wholeheartedly support the new framework, with all the 18 indicators against which we're meant to measure the progress of the economy, and therefore, what they're going to do about it with regards planning to raise rates. And I really hope it won't be withdrawn later, as Carney kind of hinted at towards the end of the press conference. So you mentioned the importance of inflation being at 2. I think it's of huge symbolic importance, because inflation's been way above target for most of the last 6-7 years. And there were many complained about that and took it as a sign that secretly MPC were colluding in giving us inflation via the back door and trying to deleverage by reducing real burdens of debt.
And finally, this week we also had Chinese trade balance. Hitting $31.9 billion, it exceeded forecasts and is significantly higher than the previous release. How important is this for China, especially with many saying that there's a slowdown?
This is really hard to make sense of for lots of reasons. I think the first reason is that trade data are everywhere, even in the Western economies where you have really rigorous and transparent procedures around the production of statistics. Trade data are rubbish, because of the ease with which the fraud goes on, the carousel trading and all that. and the extreme difficulty in measuring the traded goods prices, which you need to deflate trade by. Who really knows what's going on in that data, from month to month. So I personally wouldn't read that much into it, especially in a country like China. So that's the first point. Is it, should we really take the data at face value? The second point is, in a Western economy, you would see, a surprisingly large surplus as a sign of a slowdown. Not so seemingly in, China, kind of export-led growth type model. But, that makes it more difficult to read, whether or not there's a slowdown in the economy as a whole just from the trade balance. So I don't really take that much from it.
Tony, thank you very much for joining us today. That is all for this edition of the Weekly Wrap-Up. For a look ahead at next week's key events, make sure you tune in on Monday for the week ahead. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.